I notice them first on a Tuesday in March, which is the same week I take over the night maintenance contract for Green Ridge Municipal Cemetery. The previous contractor left no notes, no transition documents, nothing except a laminated keycard in an envelope taped to the operations office door and a single post-it note that read, "Lights are automatic. Don't worry about them. I worry about them." Let me back up. My name is Dana, and I've been running a 2-person grounds maintenance company for 6 years. It's me and my business partner, Carla, who handles the daytime residential contracts while I take the commercial and municipal work that nobody else wants to bid on. Cemeteries, highway medians, retention ponds. The kind of landscapes people want maintained but never want to think about. We underbid the Green Ridge contract by 11% because we needed it. Our truck transmission died in January, and the replacement ate through what should have been our spring operating budget. Carla didn't want the cemetery job. She said it was too far from our other sites, that the overnight monitoring requirement would destroy my sleep schedule, that municipal contracts always have hidden compliance requirements that eat you alive. She was right about all of it. But we needed the money, and I told her I could handle it. The contract is straightforward on paper. Grounds maintenance, twice weekly March through November, weekly December through February. Snow removal on all paved paths within 4 hours of accumulation, exceeding 2 inches. Litter removal from the public areas daily, and the part that made other contractors pass. Overnight facility monitoring 3 nights per week, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. The monitoring is mostly a liability requirement. The cemetery had a vandalism problem 2 years ago, and the city's insurance carrier now requires documented human presence during overnight hours. I sit in the operations building. I do a perimeter walk at midnight and again. At 3, I log any incidents and I file a weekly report with the Parks Department. The operations building is a single-story cinder block structure near the cemetery's north gate, built in the 1970s, and never updated beyond the installation of a digital thermostat and a Wi-Fi router that barely reaches the front desk. There's a monitoring station with 4 camera feeds: North Gate, South Gate, the columbarium, and the maintenance yard. A desk, a space heater, a mini fridge, and a bathroom with a toilet that runs constantly unless you jiggle the handle in a specific way that took me 2 weeks to learn. The cameras are low resolution and the infrared is patchy. Most of what I see on them is gray static interrupted by the occasional deer or raccoon. Green Ridge itself is a mid-sized municipal cemetery, about 40 acres, established in 1923. It sits on a gentle hill on the eastern edge of the city, bordered by a residential neighborhood to the south, a strip mall to the west, and undeveloped wooded land to the north and east. There are approximately 9,000 interments. The oldest section is near the hilltop, with weathered limestone markers and several family mausoleums from the 20s and 30s. The newer sections spread downhill toward the south and west gates, with flush-mounted granite markers that make mowing easier. There are paved paths throughout, lined with ornamental trees, mostly Bradford pears that smell terrible in spring and split apart in ice storms. The lighting system is what concerns me tonight and every night since that first Tuesday. The cemetery has 43 pathway lights. They're solar-charged LED fixtures on aluminum posts installed as part of a 2019 infrastructure grant. According to the documentation I found in the filing cabinet, they operate on photocell sensors. They turn on at dusk, off at dawn automatically. The city's parks department maintains them. I have no control over them and no access to their wiring or programming. On that first Tuesday, I arrived at 10:45 for my shift. It was overcast, cool, maybe 42 degrees. I parked in the maintenance yard, walked to the operations building, let myself in, turned on the space heater, checked the camera feeds. Everything normal. At midnight, I did my first perimeter walk. The path lights were on as expected. It was dark. I walked the main circuit, which takes about 40 minutes if I don't rush. I logged no incidents. I returned to the building, made instant coffee, and sat at the desk with my laptop working on invoicing for our other contracts. At 1:14 a.m., it started raining. I noticed because the sound on the metal roof of the operations building is distinctive. A kind of hollow drumming that builds gradually as a front moves in. I glanced at the camera feeds. The image quality always degrades in rain, but I could see the path lights reflecting off the wet pavement in the North Gate feed. Normal. The next morning, after my shift ended at 5, I drove home and slept until noon. When I woke up, I had a text from Carla. "Did you see the rain last night? Supposed to be heavy again Thursday." Thursday, I arrived at the same time. The sky was clear. At 11:20, I was settling in at the desk when I noticed something on the North Gate camera. The path lights along the main North-South Avenue were, I want to say flickering, but that's not quite right. They were pulsing, very slowly. A gradual brightening and dimming like breathing. The cycle took maybe 8 seconds. Bright, dim, bright, dim. I watched for a few minutes. I assumed it was a voltage irregularity, maybe related to the solar charge cycle. I made a note in my log. Path lights exhibiting slow pulse pattern, North Avenue, 11:22 p.m. Possible charging issue. At 12:15, I did my perimeter walk. By then, the pulsing had stopped. The lights were steady, normal brightness. I walked the full circuit, everything quiet. I returned to the building. At 1:41 a.m., it started raining. Hard. A sudden downpour that I hadn't seen in any forecast I'd checked that evening. I didn't connect the two events. Not yet. The following Tuesday, I arrived for my shift and the sky was perfectly clear. Stars visible. No rain in any forecast through the weekend. At 11:08, I checked the cameras as part of my arrival routine. The lights were steady, normal. They stayed that way all night. No rain came. Thursday, clear sky again, no pulsing, no rain. Saturday, I arrived at 10:50 overcast, but the forecast said dry. I checked the cameras at 11. The path lights on the western loop, not the North Avenue this time, but the newer section near the South Gate, were pulsing. Same rhythm, 8-second cycle, slow, deliberate breathing of light. I pulled up the weather radar on my phone, clear in all directions for 60 miles. I made a note. I watched. At 11:40, the pulsing spread. I could see it moving through the camera feeds. The South Gate camera showed the western loop lights pulsing, and then the columbarium camera showed its nearest lights begin the same cycle. And then the North Gate camera picked it up, like a wave moving through the cemetery from west to east. Every light joining the same slow rhythm within about 15 minutes. At 12:10, I went outside to see it with my own eyes, rather than through the cameras. The air was still, cool but not cold. I stood on the operations building's small concrete porch and looked down the North Avenue. Every light I could see was pulsing in perfect synchronization. Bright, dim, bright, dim. The effect was, I don't want to say beautiful, but it was beautiful. It made the cemetery look like it was breathing. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes. Then I went inside and checked the radar again. Still clear. At 2:17 a.m., the rain came. Not gradually. It arrived like a wall. One moment in still air, the next moment, heavy sheets of water hitting the building so hard I could feel the vibration through the floor. I checked the radar. A storm cell had appeared, not moved in from a distance, but formed directly overhead within minutes, according to the animation. It dumped nearly an inch in 40 minutes and then dissipated. I sat at the desk after it passed, listening to the last drops ticking off the roof, and I wrote in my log, lights pulsed 11, 12, 10, all sections synchronized. Rain arrived 2:17 a.m., heavy, unexpected. No forecast predicted this system. Then I wrote below it. Second time lights preceded rain. First time was 3:07. I stared at what I'd written. I almost crossed it out. Correlation isn't causation. Solar-charged LED fixtures don't predict weather. I'm a grounds maintenance contractor, not a meteorologist, and I'm not a person who believes in things like this. But I left the note. The next week, Carla and I were doing a walkthrough of a residential property we maintain in the suburbs, and I mentioned the lights to her. Not the weather connection, just the pulsing behavior. I framed it as a maintenance concern. Should I report it to the Parks Department? Is it a wiring issue I should flag? Carla shrugged. Solar LEDs do weird things when the batteries degrade. Probably just needs a panel replacement on some of them. All of them at once? Could be the controller. Some systems have a central unit that manages the whole network. I nodded. That made sense. I didn't mention the rain. That Saturday, I watched clear night. No pulsing, no rain came the following Tuesday. Overcast at arrival. At 11:33, the lights began pulsing, all of them. Simultaneously this time, no wave pattern, no gradual spread. Every light in every section at once, breathing in that same 8-second rhythm. I didn't go outside. I watched the cameras. I opened a weather radar tab and refreshed it every 5 minutes. At 1:09, the rain started. Heavy, sustained for over an hour. I updated my log. That made 3 confirmed instances. Lights pulse. Rain follows within 1 to 3 hours, regardless of what forecasts predicted. I want to be clear about something. I am not a superstitious person. I'm not religious. I don't believe in ghosts or hauntings or anything that can't be explained through known physical processes. My first assumption was electromagnetic, some kind of atmospheric pressure change preceding a storm that affected the solar panel, charging systems, or the LED drivers. A sensitivity in the hardware that functioned as an inadvertent barometer. That would be interesting. Maybe even useful, but it would be explainable. So I started documenting systematically. I created a spreadsheet. Date, time of pulsing onset, duration of pulsing, time of rain onset, rain intensity, whether the rain appeared in forecasts, whether the radar showed approaching systems or spontaneous formation. Over the next 6 weeks, 18 overnight shifts, I logged 7 pulsing events. Every single one was followed by rain. The interval between pulsing onset and rain arrival ranged from 47 minutes to 3 hours and 12 minutes. In 4 of the 7 cases, no rain was forecast. In 2 cases, rain was forecast, but not until the following afternoon. It arrived overnight instead. In 1 case, rain was forecast and arrived roughly on schedule, but the lights pulsed a full 3 hours before the forecast window. In the same period, there were 4 rainy nights with no preceding pulse, but in each of those cases, the rain was light, drizzle, mist, barely measurable accumulation. The lights only seemed to respond to or predict heavy rain, significant downpours, the kind that would accumulate standing water in the low sections of the cemetery sea, the kind that would overwhelm the drainage channels along the eastern boundary. I started checking rainfall totals against my pulse observations. Every pulse-preceded rain event deposited at least half an inch. The non-pulse rains were all under 1/10 of an inch. The pattern was clean, cleaner than it should have been. In week 5 of my documentation, I brought it to Carla. I showed her the spreadsheet. I expected her to tell me I was seeing patterns in noise, that confirmation bias was doing the work, that I needed more sleep. She looked at the data for a long time. Then she said, "Have you told the Parks Department?" Told them what? That the cemetery lights predict rain? That there's an electrical anomaly in their lighting system that correlates with atmospheric conditions. Frame it technically. They'll think I'm insane. You have 6 weeks of data, Dana. Either the hardware is responding to some atmospheric variable you're measuring by proxy, or, she stopped, or what, or you need more sleep. She wasn't wrong about the sleep. The overnight shifts were destroying me. I'd get home at 5:30, sleep until noon or 1, then handle our daytime obligations until 10, then drive to the cemetery. On my off nights, I'd try to reset to a normal schedule and fail. I was averaging 5 hours of broken sleep per day. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. My attention drifted in conversations. I stopped cooking and ate almost exclusively from the gas station near my apartment. Pre-packaged sandwiches, energy drinks, those sad little fruit cups in syrup. But the exhaustion made the overnight hours feel different, sharper and softer simultaneously. The cemetery at night, seen through that gauze of fatigue, became a different landscape than the one I maintained during daylight hours. The headstones looked less like markers and more like infrastructure. The paths looked less like walking routes and more like circulation, veins, channels, meant to move something through the space. And the lights, when they pulsed, looked less like malfunctioning LEDs and more like, I don't know, like indicators, like a system announcing a state change. I need to tell you about the Tuesday in late April. This is where it stopped being a curiosity and started being something else. I arrived at 10:45, clear sky, warm for the first time that spring. I could smell the Bradford pears from the parking lot, that rotten sweetness that means they're in full bloom. I let myself into the operations building, checked cameras, everything normal, lights steady. At 11:15, the lights pulsed, all sections, simultaneous onset, 8 cycle. I logged it. I opened the radar. Clear. I noted the time and settled in to wait for rain. But at 11:20, something happened that hadn't happened before. The pulsing rate changed. It accelerated. The 8-second cycle compressed to 6 seconds. Then 4. Then something faster that I couldn't easily count. The lights were flickering now rather than breathing. A rapid strobe visible even on the low-resolution camera feeds. Then they went out, all of them. Every pathway light in the cemetery went dark simultaneously. I sat in the sudden dimness of the camera feeds. All 4 screens showing nothing but black, interrupted by the faint gray shapes of trees and stones caught by residual infrared. The operations building's own lights were still on. The outage was only the pathway system. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. At 11:24, the lights came back on, full brightness. No pulsing, steady, but they were wrong. I knew they were wrong immediately, though it took me a moment to understand why. The color, the pathway lights were warm white. 3000 K, according to the installation specs. A soft yellowish tone, chosen specifically because cool white light in a cemetery looks institutional and uninviting. The lights that came back on were not warm white. They were a pale blue white, maybe 5000 K, maybe higher. The kind of light that makes living skin look gray and dead grass look like metal. I stared at the cameras. The entire cemetery was illuminated in this cold surgical white. It looked like a different place. The familiar headstones cast different shadows, sharper, longer, more defined. The trees looked skeletal despite being in full leaf. I told myself this was a voltage issue. A power surge had reset the LED drivers to a different color temperature setting. That's technically possible. I've seen LED floods change color when their drivers malfunction. This was explainable. I put on my jacket and went outside for my midnight walk. I told myself I was doing my job. I was doing my scheduled perimeter check. That's all. The light outside was exactly as cold as it appeared on camera. Walking through it felt different from walking through the normal, warm-lit cemetery. Shadows were harder. My own shadow on the pavement looked wrong, too crisp, too dark, as if the light source was more focused than 43 distributed pathway fixtures should produce. I felt exposed in a way I hadn't before, like the light was for seeing me rather than for me to see by. I walked the North Avenue. Halfway down, I stopped. There was a smell I couldn't identify, not the Bradford pears. Something underneath smell, like wet limestone or, no, like ozone. The smell before lightning, sharp and clean and somehow threatening. The air was completely still, not a breath of wind. The temperature had dropped noticeably since I'd arrived. I could see my breath now, which I couldn't 40 minutes earlier. I checked my phone, 38 degrees. It had been 54 when I parked. I stood in that cold blue light in the middle of the North Avenue with 9,000 graves around me, and I felt. Watched is the wrong word. Watched implies someone looking. This was more like registered, like I had been entered into a ledger, like my presence had been noted by something that operates through notation. I completed the walk, faster than usual, but I completed it. I logged everything: light color change, temperature drop, ozone smell, start and end time of perimeter check. I used clinical language. I was professional about it. At 1:58, the rain came, but not rain like before. I've lived in this region my entire life, and I have never heard rain like this. The volume of water hitting the roof sounded like the building was being buried. I couldn't see anything on the cameras, just white water. The drainage channels that run along the eastern boundary were visible on the North Gate camera for about 30 seconds before the water completely overwhelmed them, and what I saw in those seconds was water moving faster than I'd ever seen water move in a cemetery drainage system. It looked like a creek in flood stage. The rain lasted for 22 minutes. It deposited, according to the gauge I'd installed on the operations building's porch rail, 1.7 inches. When it stopped, the lights were back to normal. Warm white, 3000 K, no pulsing. I sat at the desk until 5 a.m. without moving. I did not do my 3 a.m. perimeter walk. I logged that I had not done it and wrote severe weather as the reason, which was true enough. Driving home that morning, I pulled over twice because I couldn't keep my eyes focused. Not from sleepiness, from something else. An overstimulation. Like my visual processing was still calibrated for that white light and couldn't readjust to the ordinary gray of a spring dawn. Everything looked too warm, too soft, too dim. I felt like I was wearing tinted lenses that I couldn't remove. I slept for 11 hours. When I woke up, I had 3 texts from Carla. The first asked about a supply order. The second asked if I was okay. The third, sent 2 hours after the second, said, "The news is reporting flash flooding in Greenridge neighborhood. They're saying it was a microburst." "Was it that bad at the cemetery?" I replied, "Yes, it was that bad." I didn't tell her about the lights changing color. I didn't tell her about the cold or the ozone or the feeling of being registered. I told myself I needed more data before I said anything. The truth is, I was afraid that saying it out loud would make it real in a way that writing it in a log didn't. Thursday's shift was normal. No pulsing, no rain. The lights were their usual warm white all night. I did both perimeter walks. The cemetery was quiet and ordinary. The Bradford pears had dropped most of their petals, and the paths were covered in white fragments that looked like wet tissue paper in the warm light. Saturday. I arrived expecting nothing. I had checked every forecast obsessively, clear and dry through Monday. I let myself in, started the heater, checked cameras. At 10:58, before I'd even fully settled in, the lights were already pulsing. All of them. And they were already wrong, not warm white. That same cold blue-white, but pulsing. Breathing in blue, I sat down slowly. I watched the feeds. The pulse rate was the same as the initial events, 8 seconds, slow and steady. But the color was the anomalous blue from Tuesday, as if the system had retained the change, or as if the change was becoming the default and warm white was now the deviation. At 11:15, the pulse rate began accelerating. I watched it compress through the same stages, 8 seconds, 6, 4, faster, faster. But this time I was watching for what came after. This time I knew the blackout was coming. At 11:19, all lights went out. I waited in the dark camera feeds. I counted 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. The lights came back at the count of 47, steady, no pulse. They were not blue-white this time. They were green, not a natural green, not the green of any lead I've ever seen used in landscape lighting. A pale, depthless green like light filtered through deep water. The camera feeds all shifted to this green, and the cemetery looked submerged. The headstones looked like they were at the bottom of something. The trees moved in a wind I couldn't hear from inside the building, and their movement looked like kelp. I did not go outside. I sat at the desk, and I watched and I made notes, and I did not go outside. At 11:40, the green lights turned off, section by section this time, not simultaneously. The western loop went dark first, then the South Gate section, then the Columbarium area, then the North Avenue, like a sequence, like a countdown, or like something moving through the cemetery, turning them off as it passed. When the last light, the northernmost fixture on the main avenue, closest to the operations building, went out, I was in complete darkness on the camera feeds. I sat in darkness for 4 minutes. Then the lights returned all at once. Warm white, 3000 K, normal as if nothing had happened. At 12:51, the rain came, heavy again but not catastrophic, about 3/4 of an inch over 40 minutes. I did neither perimeter walk that night. I logged equipment malfunction, monitoring from station as my reason. I called the parks department's after-hours maintenance line and left a message reporting a lighting system malfunction. I described only the blackout, not the color changes. I said the system appeared to lose power briefly around 11:20, and I wanted it documented for the file. Monday morning, I got a call back from a guy named Kevin at the Parks Department. He thanked me for reporting it, said he'd send someone to check the central controller, and asked if the lights seemed to be working normally now. I said yes. He said it was probably a firmware issue. The controller sometimes needed to be rebooted remotely, and they'd had similar reports from other solar installations around the city. Other installations do this? The pulsing? He paused. No, I meant the blackout. You said they lost power? Right. Yes, the blackout. That's what I reported. We'll take a look. Thanks for flagging it. I almost said more. I almost asked him if any other cemetery contractors had reported anything unusual. But I didn't, because there are no other cemetery contractors. Green Ridge is the only municipal cemetery in the city. The others are all private or church-owned. 2 weeks passed. The Parks Department never sent anyone that I saw. The lights continued to function normally on nights when no heavy rain was coming. On 2 separate occasions, they pulsed and rain followed, both times in the normal warm white color, both times with a standard 8-second rhythm. No color changes, no blackouts. I began to wonder if the aberrant events were a one-time anomaly, a hardware glitch that had resolved itself. Then May arrived, and the pattern changed again. On the first Thursday in May, I arrived for my shift to find the lights already in an unusual state. They weren't pulsing, they were on, and steady normal color, but they were brighter than I'd ever seen them, significantly brighter. The camera feeds were nearly overexposed. The pathway pavement washed out to white in the areas nearest to fixtures. I went outside to look. The light was warm white, correct color temperature, but the intensity was probably twice what it should be. Each fixture was throwing a hard pool of light that overlapped with its neighbors, creating an almost continuous illumination along the paths. The spaces between fixtures, which normally held comfortable shadows, were fully lit. The cemetery looked floodlit, like a construction site at night, like something being searched. The grass between the graves was visible in perfect detail. Every headstone was casting a razor-sharp double shadow from the 2 nearest fixtures. The tree canopy was lit from below in a way that made it look solid, a ceiling rather than a canopy. I stood on the porch and watched. There was no sound except distant highway traffic. The air was warm and damp, no ozone smell, no temperature anomaly. I went back inside. I logged lighting system at approximately 200% normal intensity, no pulsing, color normal, checking cameras for any visible cause. I saw nothing unusual on camera except the light itself. No one in the cemetery, no vehicles, no animals that I could see, though the overexposure might have hidden them. At 12:15, I did my perimeter walk. Under that intense light, the cemetery felt like a stage set. I could see everything, every pebble on the path, every crack in the pavement, every inscription on every stone within 50 feet of the walkway. My shadow was crisp and short and multiplied. A dozen overlapping shadows pointing in every direction from the overlapping light sources. I noticed something during that walk that I hadn't noticed before, because I'd never been able to see it before. The drainage channels along the eastern boundary, concrete-lined trenches about 18 inches wide and 12 inches deep, had marks on their interior surfaces. Regular marks, evenly spaced. They looked like they'd been scored into the concrete with something sharp. Lines perpendicular to the direction of flow, about 4 inches apart, running the entire length of the channel as far as I could see in both directions. I'd maintained this cemetery for 2 months. I'd walked past these channels dozens of times. I never noticed the marks because the channels were always in shadow at night, and during my daytime visits, I was focused on mowing and trimming and never looked down into them. I crouched beside the channel. The marks were deep, a 1/4 inch at least, deliberate, not cracking from freeze-thaw cycles or root intrusion, cut into the concrete with precision. They looked like measurement marks, like gradations on a ruler. But measuring what? Water level? Flow rate? The channel was dry. I walked along the eastern boundary and checked every visible section of the drainage channel. The marks were continuous, hundreds of them, evenly spaced, running the full length of the system. Some had dark residue in them, dried organic matter maybe. Some were clean and pale as if recently exposed. I took photos with my phone. In the intense white light, they came out sharp and clear. I completed the walk and returned to the building. No rain came that night. The lights remained at high intensity until approximately 4:45 a.m., when they dimmed to normal brightness and then shut off at dawn as usual. I showed Carla the photos the next day. She looked at them on my phone screen and said, "Tally marks? They're too regular, too precise, and they're scored into concrete. Infrastructure markings? Like for maintenance? What would you be tallying in a drainage channel?" She zoomed in on one photo. "How many are there?" I didn't count. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They run the entire eastern boundary. "Huh!" She handed my phone back. "Ask the Parks Department." Might be from the original installation, measurement points for grade verification or something. I emailed Kevin at Parks. I described the marks, attached 2 photos, asked if they were part of the original drainage system documentation. He replied the next day, "Those aren't in any of our plans. Might have been done by the previous contractor for drainage monitoring. Not sure. I'll flag it for the next site inspection." The previous contractor, the one who left me a post-it note saying, "Lights are automatic, don't worry about them." The one who left no transition documentation, no maintenance records, no log books. The one whose contract, according to the Parks Department, ended abruptly 3 months before mine began, and whose company name, when I searched for it, returned no results. No website, no business registration, no licensing records. A company called Threshold Services LLC that apparently existed long enough to hold a municipal contract and then dissolved without a trace. I spent a day trying to find them. The Parks Department had a contact number that was disconnected. The contract itself, which I requested under a public records inquiry, listed an address that turned out to be a UPS store mailbox location. The signature on the contract was illegible. The contract had been active for 7 years. 7 years. Some company with a name that now sounds deliberately chosen, monitored this cemetery 3 nights a week for 7 years and then vanished. I told myself this was just a fly-by-night contractor who'd lost their license or gotten a better deal somewhere else. It happens constantly in this industry. Small operations appear and disappear. People burn out, move away, stop filing their paperwork. The name was probably just someone who thought it sounded professional without thinking about what threshold means in the context of a cemetery. But I kept thinking about that post-it note. Lights are automatic. Don't worry about them. Not the lights are on a timer or the lights are managed by the city. Automatic. And then don't worry about them. Why would you specifically tell someone not to worry about something unless there was something to worry about? The second Thursday in May, I arrive at 10:40. Overcast, warm, humid. The kind of air that feels like it's already rained but hasn't yet. That pre-storm heaviness that sits on your skin. The lights are pulsing when I pull into the maintenance yard. I can see them through the windshield before I even park. Blue-white, fast cycle, maybe 3 seconds. Rapid breathing. I sit in the truck for a full minute before getting out. I can feel my heartbeat in my throat. This is ridiculous. They're LED fixtures on aluminum poles. They are objects installed by a city parks department. They are not anything other than that. I get out, walk to the operations building, let myself in. The camera feeds confirm what I saw from the parking lot. All sections pulsing, blue-white, rapid cycle. I log the time, 10:43 p.m. At 10:51, the pulsing stops. Not a blackout this time. The lights simply shift to steady illumination. But they stay blue-white, and they're at that high intensity again. The cemetery is flooded with cold, bright surgical light. I watch the cameras. For 3 minutes, nothing moves. Then, on the North Gate camera, something. I have to describe this carefully, because I've gone back and looked at the recording, and I still don't fully understand what I saw. The camera quality is low. The infrared interacts strangely with the LED illumination, but what I see is this. At the far end of the North Avenue, at the boundary, where the pathway lights end and the tree line begins, there is a shape that is darker than the trees behind it. It's not moving. It's not a person. It's too wide, too low, too flat. It looks like a shadow that's been cast without an object to cast it. A dark patch on the ground, maybe 6 feet across, maybe 10. Irregular edges. I watch it. It doesn't move. I switch to the South Gate camera. The south end of the cemetery looks empty. I switch to the columbarium camera. Empty. Maintenance yard, empty. I switch back to the North Gate camera. The dark patch is closer. It hasn't moved. I didn't see it move, but it's closer to the camera than it was. It is on the path now. Before it was at the tree line. Now it's on the pavement, maybe 30 feet closer. My hands are cold. I realize I haven't turned on the space heater. The building is cold. The air inside feels like the air outside. Heavy, damp, waiting. I watch the North Gate feed for 10 continuous minutes without looking away. The dark patch does not move. It doesn't flicker, doesn't shift, doesn't change shape. It is stationary. Absolutely stationary. I look down to check the time on my phone. 11:07. I look back up. It's closer, significantly closer. maybe halfway down the North Avenue now, which would put it about 200 feet from the operations building. I did not see it move. I looked away for less than 2 seconds. The rational part of my brain, the part that bids contracts and files taxes and maintains spreadsheets, says, it's a camera artifact. The infrared is malfunctioning in the altered light. You're seeing a processing error. The other part of my brain, the part that kept a log, the part that noticed the drainage marks, the part that searched for Threshold Services, LLC, says nothing. It just watches. I do not look away from the screen again. I stare at the dark patch on the North Avenue, and I do not blink more than I absolutely must for 11 minutes. It doesn't move. It sits there on the path, a flat darkness in the blue-white light, edges slightly irregular, like a pool of something that's been poured, like spilled paint that doesn't reflect. At 11:18, the lights go out, all of them. The camera feeds go to pure infrared, and in the gray-green darkness of the infrared image, I cannot see the dark patch. I cannot tell if it's gone or if it's simply invisible without the blue-white light to contrast against. I sit in the operations building with the overhead fluorescent humming above me and the hot water heater ticking in the bathroom and the sound of my own breathing, which is faster than it should be. And I wait. The lights come back at 11:21, warm white, normal intensity. Normal everything. I check the North Gate camera. The avenue is empty. No dark patch, no anomaly. It's just a row of warm-lit pathway fixtures leading toward the tree line, perfectly ordinary. At 12:34, the rain arrives. Not catastrophic, but steady and heavy. About an inch over the course of an hour. I don't do either perimeter walk. I log it as weather-related. This is becoming a pattern of its own. Me finding reasons not to walk the grounds, me documenting excuses for myself. After the rain stops, I go back through the camera feed recordings. Our system keeps 72 hours of footage on a local drive before overwriting. I scrub back to the 11 o'clock hour and watch the North Gate feed. The dark patch is there. It appears at 10:52 when the lights shift to steady blue-white. It's at the tree line. At 10:59, the moment I remember switching to check other cameras, it's closer. At 11:01, another moment I looked away, closer still. The footage confirms that it moves only during the frames, when no observer could have been watching that specific feed. Not when I blinked. The camera records continuously regardless of my eyes, but when I switched cameras, when the feed itself was not being displayed on the active monitor. That's not possible. That implies it responds to the state of being observed through the monitoring system. That implies awareness of the camera as an apparatus of observation, not just of a biological observer. I watched the footage 4 times. Every positional change corresponds exactly to a moment when I switched away from the North Gate feed. It moves precisely during the gaps in display, not during the gaps in recording. The recording is continuous and shows nothing moving between frames. The positions simply change between moments when the feed is being actively viewed. I don't know what to do with this information. I tell Carla the next day, all of it, the lights, the pattern, the color changes, the dark patch, the recording behavior. I show her the footage on my laptop. She watches it twice without speaking. Then she says, "Quit the contract. We need the money. We'll find another contract. There isn't another contract in this market that covers what we lost on the truck. Dana." She turns to face me directly. Something is wrong there, whether it's a hardware issue making you paranoid from sleep deprivation, or whether it's something else. Either way, the answer is you stop going there at night. The footage shows. I know what the footage shows. I'm looking at it. I'm telling you that whatever is happening, you working alone in that building at night, with no one knowing you're there, is not safe. Not from a ghost or whatever. From a basic human safety standpoint, you're exhausted. You're working alone overnight. You're not sleeping. You're not eating properly. Even without the weird lights, this job is destroying you. She's right. I know she's right. I also know that the pulsing lights predict rain with perfect accuracy, that something in the drainage channels has been methodically marked by someone over years, that a company called Threshold Services held this position for 7 years and left one cryptic note before dissolving, and that something on the North Gate camera moves only when it isn't being observed through the display system. I don't quit. I tell Carla I'll think about it. I go back Thursday. Thursday is quiet, normal lights, no pulsing, no rain. I do both perimeter walks. The cemetery is peaceful. An ordinary graveyard in late spring smelling of cut grass and warm earth. I feel foolish for my fear. Saturday. I arrive at 11. The lights are normal. I settle in. At 11:40, they begin pulsing. Warm white this time, no color change. Standard 8-second cycle. I log it. I check the radar. Clear. I watch the North Gate camera. I do not switch feeds. I keep my eyes on the North Avenue. The lights pulse for 37 minutes and then return to steady. Nothing appears on the path. No dark patch. No movement of any kind. At 1:15, rain arrives. Moderate to heavy. Normal. I feel relief so profound it's almost euphoric. A normal event. Lights pulse, rain comes, nothing else happens. The system, whatever it is, however it works, just does its thing without requiring anything from me. Maybe the color changes and the dark patch were anomalies, hardware glitches, sleep deprivation hallucinations mediated through low-quality camera equipment. This relief lasts until the following Tuesday. I arrive at 10:45, clear night, warm. I park in the maintenance yard and walk toward the operations building. The pathway lights are on, normal, warm white, steady. But the operations building door is open, not broken open, unlocked and standing open about 6 inches. I locked it when I left Saturday morning. I always lock it. The keycard system logs entries, and I check those logs weekly as part of my reporting. I pull out my phone and access the keycard log remotely. No entries since my departure Saturday at 5:04 a.m. I push the door open with my foot. The building is dark. I reach inside and flip the light switch. The fluorescent flickers on. Everything looks normal. Desk, monitors, mini fridge, space heater. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place, except on the desk, centered on the keyboard of the monitoring computer, there is a post-it note, yellow, same brand as the one that was on the door when I first took the contract. Same handwriting, small, precise, slightly back-slanted. It says, "They only need the rain now. You can stop watching." I stand in the doorway for a long time. I read the note 4 times. Then I pick it up and put it in my jacket pocket, and I sit down at the desk and I start my shift. I start my shift because I don't know what else to do. I have a contract. I have obligations. I have a truck payment and a lease payment and a business to keep running. I start my shift because stopping would mean accepting that the note is real, that someone was here. that someone knows what I've been documenting, that my documentation matters enough for someone to tell me to stop. The lights don't pulse that night. No rain comes. I do both perimeter walks. The cemetery is quiet. On my 3 a.m. walk, I check the drainage channels on the eastern boundary. The marks are still there, but some of them, I'm almost certain, are fresh. The concrete dust in the newest ones hasn't had time to weather or darken. They're sharp-edged and pale. Someone is still making them, or something is. Wednesday morning, I go to the parks department in person. I ask to speak with Kevin. He's at his desk eating a sandwich. I ask him, as casually as I can, whether anyone else has access to the operations building at Greenridge. "Just you and us," he says. "We have a master key for inspections, but we haven't been out there in probably 8 months." "Why?" "The door was open when I arrived last night. Wanted to make sure it wasn't a maintenance visit I didn't know about," he frowns. "Wasn't us. Could have been wind. Those latch plates get loose sometimes. It's a keycard system, right?" "Huh, I'll make a note. You want us to send someone to check the latch mechanism?" "Sure. Yeah, that'd be good." I don't mention the post-it note. I don't show it to him. I don't even fully understand why. It sits in my jacket pocket like a small, flat weight that I can feel against my ribs. That week, I do something I've been avoiding. I search for information about Greenridge Cemetery that goes beyond the maintenance contract documentation. I look for news articles, historical records, anything unusual. What I find is mostly ordinary. The cemetery was established in 1923 by the city council. It expanded twice, in 1947 and 1971. The 2019 lighting installation was part of a broader infrastructure grant that also funded new pathway, paving, and drainage improvements. The columbarium was added in 2005. There were vandalism incidents in 2022 that led to the overnight monitoring requirement. But I find one thing that isn't ordinary. In 2016, a local community newspaper, the kind that covers school board meetings and farmers markets, ran a short piece about neighborhood complaints. Residents in the houses along the cemetery's south boundary had reported unusual drainage issues. Water appearing in their basements during dry weather. Not sewage, clean water, cold with a mineral smell. The city had investigated and found no infrastructure failure. The article quoted a utility department spokesperson saying it was likely related to the water table and seasonal fluctuation. 2016, the same year Threshold Services LLC would have been in the first year of their contract. I find one more thing. A public comment submitted to the City Council in 2019 during the review period for the lighting installation grant. It's from a woman named Margot Keller, and it's 3 sentences. "I urge the council to reconsider the lighting installation at Greenridge Cemetery. The drainage system there operates on principles that are not fully understood by current staff. Additional electrical infrastructure may interact with existing conditions in unpredictable ways." The comment was noted and filed. The lighting was installed. Margot Keller's name returns no other results in the city's public record system. I search for her more broadly and find nothing. No social media, no professional profiles, no other public comments on anything, anywhere. I try one more thing. I search for Margot Keller in connection with Threshold Services, LLC. Nothing. But when I search for Margot Keller and cemetery together, I find a single result. A death record from Greenridge Municipal Cemetery. Margot R. Keller, 1944-2020. Plot 7, Section D, Row 14. She's buried there. She submitted a public comment warning the city about the lighting installation in 2019, and she's been buried there since 2020. This means nothing. People who live near cemeteries sometimes get buried in them. People who comment on city projects sometimes die within a year of commenting. This means nothing. But I go to Plot 7, Section D, Row 14 during my next daytime visit. It's a flush-mounted granite marker, well-maintained, no decorations. The plot is in the eastern section of the cemetery, about 40 feet from the drainage channel. I look at the nearest drainage channel from her plot. The marks in the concrete are denser here, closer together. Maybe 2 inches apart instead of 4, and deeper. Deep enough that some of them have become actual gaps in the concrete, narrow slots through which I can see dark earth beneath. I crouch down and look more closely. In 3 of the deeper slots, there's something that isn't earth. A pale residue, smooth and slightly glossy, like dried mineral deposit. Like the kind of buildup you see inside pipes in hard water areas. Calcium, lime, that white crystalline crust. But this isn't inside a pipe. This is in open cuts, in a concrete drainage channel that only carries rainwater intermittently. Rainwater. The lights predict heavy rain. The channels carry the rain. The marks measure something about the rain in the nasals. The rain passes over, through, the cemetery, over the 9,000 interments, collecting whatever rainwater collects when it passes through 40 acres of ground that contains 9,000 human remains in various states of. I stand up. I walk back to my truck. I drive to our storage unit where we keep equipment, and I sit in the cab for 20 minutes without moving. Here is what I think. I want to be clear that I think this and I don't believe it. Because thinking something and believing it are different things. And the difference is what lets me keep going back. I think the lighting system is connected to the drainage system. Not electrically, functionally. I think the lights activate in their anomalous state when atmospheric conditions favor heavy rain. I think the drainage channels are not drainage in the way the city understands drainage. I think they're collection infrastructure. I think the marks are measurement, tallying accumulation of something that the rain carries out of the ground and deposits in the channels. I think the mineral buildup in the deeper marks is that something. I think Margot Keller knew this. I think Threshold Services knew this. I think someone, maybe multiple someones over a long period, has been monitoring and maintaining a system that exists underneath the system the city thinks it installed. I think the 2019 lighting installation accidentally tapped into something that was already there. I think the solar LED fixtures, connected to whatever electrical field exists in that ground, began responding to the same conditions the original system responded to. I think the lights pulse because the ground is doing something in advance of heavy rain, building a charge, shifting a field, preparing, and the LED drivers are sensitive enough to pick it up. I think the dark patch on the North Avenue camera is something that becomes visible under the altered light, because the altered light corresponds to an active state of the ground system, something that exists there at a frequency or in a form that only appears when the system is running. And I think the post-it note, both of them, came from someone who understands all of this and is telling me gently not to interfere. Lights are automatic. Don't worry about them. They only need the rain now. You can stop watching, not stop working, not leave, stop watching, stop documenting, stop looking at the thing that's been there for longer than the lights, longer than the drainage, longer than the 2019 grant, longer than the 1923 establishment. The thing that is buried deeper than the 9,000 bodies and uses them, uses what remains of them, uses the rain to process what remains of them. For something I cannot begin to name. I don't quit the contract. I don't tell Carla what I think. I don't tell Kevin at Parks. I don't tell anyone. I keep showing up 3 nights a week. I do my walks. I monitor the cameras. When the lights pulse, I note it. When the rain comes, I note it. I have stopped checking for the dark patch. I have stopped watching the North Gate feed when the lights are in their altered state. I keep my eyes on the South Gate camera or the maintenance yard or my own laptop screen. I don't look. This is not courage. This is not acceptance. This is a woman paying off a truck transmission, doing the minimum required to fulfill a contract while deliberately not seeing what happens in her peripheral vision. But here's the thing I haven't told Carla, haven't written in any log, haven't admitted to myself until right now. 3 weeks ago, early May, I was doing my 3 a.m. perimeter walk on a night with no pulsing, no anomaly, no rain expected. Normal night, normal walk. I was passing the eastern drainage channel near Section D when I heard water, running water. In the channel, fast-moving water. It hadn't rained in 4 days. The channel should have been bone dry. I stopped walking. I listened. The sound was distinct. Liquid moving over concrete with speed and volume. The sound of the channel doing what it was built to do during a heavy rain. But there was no rain. The sky was clear. Stars visible. I looked down into the channel. In the warm light of the nearest pathway fixture, I could see the bottom of the concrete trench clearly. It was dry. There was no water. The channel was empty. The concrete was dry and pale, and the marks were visible, and the mineral deposits were visible, and there was no water anywhere. But I could hear it. I could hear water rushing through that channel as clearly as I could hear my own footsteps on the pavement. The sound was directional. I could tell it was moving east to west, downhill, following the grade of the channel. I could hear it pass me. I could hear it diminish as it moved away toward the western terminus of the drainage system, where the channel empties into a municipal stormwater connection that feeds into the city system, that feeds into the treatment plant, that feeds, eventually, back into the domestic water supply. I stood there listening to invisible water rush out of the cemetery carrying whatever it carries, going where it goes, becoming what it becomes when it reaches the place where it becomes something people drink. I completed my walk. I went back to the building. I logged no incidents. Last Thursday, 6 days ago, I arrived for my shift and there was a new post-it note on the desk. Same handwriting, same yellow paper. Thank you for not watching, and below it in slightly different ink, as if added as an afterthought. The new contractor starts in July. You'll receive a standard non-renewal notice from Parks. It's not personal. I'm losing the contract, somehow. Through a process I cannot trace, someone is arranging for me to be replaced. Probably another company with an untraceable name that will monitor the cameras and do the walks, and not look too closely at the drainage channels, and not make spreadsheets about the lights. I should feel relieved. I should feel rescued. The rational response is gratitude. Someone is extracting me from a situation that was eroding my health, my sleep, my basic grip on what's real and what isn't. Instead, I feel excluded. That's the honest word. I feel like I was close to understanding something, and the door is being closed. Gently, respectfully, even kindly, but closed. I was allowed to see enough to know that there is something to see, and now I'm being told that my seeing has served its purpose and I can stop. What purpose? What did my watching accomplish? The note said, "They only need the rain now." Was there a time when they needed more than the rain? Was there a time when they needed someone watching? Did my documentation, my spreadsheet, my obsessive logging do something? Complete something? Was I participating in a process I thought I was only observing? The marks in the drainage channel. Some of them were fresh. Someone is still making them. What if the marks don't measure the flow? What if the marks allow it? What if each cut in the concrete is an opening, a scored threshold through which something passes more easily? And someone has been slowly, methodically, over years, turning that drainage channel into something more permeable than concrete should be? What if the lights turning on before heavy rain isn't prediction? What if it's invitation? I have 3 more weeks on the contract. I will finish them because I have professional obligations, and because the invoice is due, and because Carla and I need the money. I will show up 3 nights a week and sit in the cinder block building and watch cameras and do my walks and not look at the drainage channels and not watch the North Gate feed when the lights change and not think about invisible water flowing toward the municipal supply. I will do this because the alternative is to look, to really look. To go out at 3 a.m. on a night when the lights are blue-white and the rain hasn't come yet and the dark patch as is on the avenue and the invisible water is rushing in dry channels. And to look down into the concrete trench and see what's actually there when the system is fully active. And I know, with the same certainty that I know the lights predict rain, that if I look, I will see something that will make it impossible to leave. I will see something that will make me the next person who holds this position for 7 years and then disappears. I will become the next threshold, the next set of hands making marks in concrete, the next unsigned note writer telling the next contractor, "Don't worry about them. The lights are automatic. The rain comes when it comes. The ground holds what it holds and releases what it releases. And someone has been helping it for a very long time, and I am not going to be that someone." 3 more weeks, then I'm done. Then I go back to mowing lawns and trimming hedges and plowing snow and never thinking about what the water carries or where it goes or why. On humid nights in late spring, I can still hear it rushing. Even here, even in my apartment, even with no drainage channel anywhere near me, moving fast and purposeful under the ground, under everything, finding its way to where it needs to be. The lights in the cemetery turn on before heavy rain. That's all. That's the whole thing. Don't look any closer than that. I mean it. Don't.